Hey guys, so the critics are raving and it's been reported that the DCEU is finally back on track with the very first female-led superhero film Wonder Woman, which stars Gal Gadot as the title character and Chris Pine is directed by Patty Jenkins. Now before we dive in, just in case you do not know the story of Wonder Woman yet, this is about Diana of Themyscira, which is an Amazon island, completely populated by women who are all warriors. Now, this is essentially Diana's interaction with, her very first interaction with man, Chris Pine's character, as well as the whole population of the world in general. And she's sort of recounting her events from her past. We first meet her in the present, she receives something, and then she essentially recounts her past during World War I for the entirety of the movie. And this movie is absolutely awesome. I love just about every single second of it, every single frame. Gal Gadot as Diana Prince or Wonder Woman or whatever you prefer to call her absolutely blew me away. I fell in love with her character from the first moment that we saw her on screen. She absolutely owned every single frame that she was in. She was definitely the center of attention. Obviously, she's the title character, so she would be, but she really owned every second of screen time that she had, and I ate every second of it up. It was absolutely fantastic. Her fight scenes were phenomenal. Her acting was really, really good as well. I remember her first coming on screen in the full Wonder Woman outfit in Batman v Superman just a few years ago, and when she arrived, the entire audience just clapped and cheered. They were so excited to see Wonder Woman. And now that she has her own movie, it was absolutely phenomenal. I have very little bad things to say about it, if at all. Again, Gal Gadot was absolutely phenomenal, and she owned every frame she was in. She was by far the best character. The very strong runner-up, though, would be Chris Pine's character of Steve Trevor, the love interest of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. His character was absolutely awesome. Everything about his character was really cool. He was funny, he was witty, he was charming. There was this real chemistry between Gal Gadot's character and Chris Pine's character. You could really tell there was some kind of attraction sort of there, at least for the character's sake. And that was very much appreciated. It felt like this was some real world with some real character building. And speaking of character building, the story was absolutely great. The movie did feel a little bit long at times. I mean, it is about 2 hours and 20-ish minutes. So it does get to be there sometimes where you're like, wow, how long is this movie? But at the same time, I kind of take that with a grain of salt, because this movie really built something, and they really told a complete story from beginning to end involving Diana in this entire arc. It actually had a complete arc for Wonder Woman, and it was absolutely fantastic because even though, like I said, there are some scenes that sort of drag and you're sort of like, okay, let's figure out this next objective and get to the action-y stuff, those moments really matter in this movie because it really builds the characters and develops them in a way that you actually do care about them. Even though they're a fictional comic book character, you really do care about them, as opposed to just rushing into the action and not really caring about where the characters are from, what their motivations are. Patty Jenkins did a phenomenal job in directing this movie. The writers did a fantastic job of really making a compelling story that you could really feel attached to at least one of the characters. And you felt really involved either with Wonder Woman, Steve Trevor. You really felt involved in not only their relationship, but like it felt like a real world that was really built around these characters. And it felt like you were watching a movie that was just very entertaining. And that's exactly what you want from a comic book movie. This was entertaining, had a great story arc, and everything just sort of fit very well together, and it was very much appreciated. One of the big pluses for me in this movie was definitely the action, though. One scene in particular, right when Gal Gadot, especially when you see it in the promos, like you're sort of oversaturated by it a lot. There's that scene where she's coming up out of the trenches and going to fight. That is definitely one of the biggest highlights of this movie. The best action sequences by far was from the moment she's in the trenches, she goes up outside of the trenches into what's essentially called no man's land, where essentially no soldiers survive trying to cross to the other side to take on the enemy. She crosses it like a total badass, and she takes it, and she does a phenomenal job. That entire sequence up to when she takes over like this small village that's been overtaken by German soldiers, that entire sequence from the time she exits the trenches to the time they take over this small town is absolutely great. The action is shot extremely well. You feel for these characters. The tension is very real, and it just makes you excited for what is happening. You are obviously rooting for Wonder Woman and the good guys, but it just feels so real and gritty. But at the same time, you're in this fantasy world where you accept that a woman can go out onto a battlefield in no man's land and essentially dodge bullets with some gauntlets on her arms. And it's just super cool to watch. It's probably one of the best action sequences in a superhero movie that I would probably say has ever existed. So it's definitely worth watching, at least for that full sequence. I can't wait to see this movie again just for that sequence. But it's a phenomenal movie overall. But that is by far my favorite action sequence of the entire movie. As for the villains of this movie, the main villain is essentially Dr. Poison, but it's also Ares. And I was kind of concerned that we weren't going to get any Ares whatsoever. But before I talk about Ares, let me talk about a bit about Dr. Poison. So Dr. Poison is sort of this scarred woman who has sort of this mask in this part of her face. And she basically creates like these gases and things like that are poisonous. Now, she has a bit of a tragic backstory. We don't really find out until later. But she's actually kind of an interesting character. I wish that we could have gotten a little bit more time with her. But let's talk about the other big bad, which is Ares. And I was concerned that we weren't going to get to see Ares in his full glory, full armor, or anything like that. And it took a good amount of the movie to get to that. But I'm glad it took that time to develop other villains and like sort of have that interaction with Ares sort of being the big bad that's looming over this entire story, essentially. So when we finally get to see Ares in all of his glory and the full armor, it looks absolutely badass, especially when Ares is fighting Wonder Woman. It's just such a cool sequence that I just feel completely sucked in by it. It was just complete visual orgasm almost. That it was just something really cool to watch Wonder Woman fighting Ares, something that you don't really think that you would ever see in your lifetime. But they did it, and they did it in a fantastic fashion, and I can do nothing but applaud them. If I had to nitpick something that I didn't like about this movie, it kind of goes in that Ares direction in that whole sequence, is that it's that overuse of CGI, but at the same time, again, I have to take it with a grain of salt because the DCEU is very much built in this realm of fantasy, and they rely very heavily on that CGI to create certain worlds, certain destruction sort of sequences, things like that. So I understand why they have to use so much CGI. Luckily, this movie didn't use that much, in my opinion. It did use a fair amount, I'm not going to lie. But especially towards that final battle with Ares, that was the biggest amount of CGI that I saw in the movie. And it did sort of distract me a little bit, but it was just still entertaining enough that I could appreciate the amount of realism that they put in it, as far as like how realistic maybe fire looked, or maybe the armor looked, or the way like light reflected off of certain characters, things like that. But it was definitely not a bad scene at all. It just was a little bit distracting, just that overuse of CGI. Again, the DCEU seems pretty heavy on it. I'm not going to lie. Justice League seems like it has more than its fair share of heavy CGI. Batman v Superman had plenty of it in its final big battle sequence. But again, these movies are taking place in massive worlds with massive sets, and a lot of this destruction just isn't practical, and it's very much in the realm of fantasy. So you have to have that disconnect where you have to realize, okay, yes, this is CGI, but it's also something that's taking place in a superhero universe. So I'm not going to nitpick completely and say, it's horrible that they use so much CGI. I understand why they use so much CGI. I just wish that they could have backed it off just a tiny bit. I think that would have made this movie just a little bit better. Overall, I definitely have to agree with the critics on this one. The DCEU has definitely gotten back on track. This was an absolutely great movie. I love the story. I love the visuals of it. I think that this was a benchmark not only for the DCEU and getting in sort of the right direction again, but I also think it's a benchmark for superhero films, seeing as it's the first female-led superhero film pretty much ever. It's also a benchmark. It's the first female-directed superhero film that's grossed so much amount of dollars. I think in the opening weekend it had like over 100 million, which is absolutely great for Patty Jenkins, and congratulations to everyone who worked on the movie. But also it's a benchmark that this is setting the bar really high for female-led superhero movies, and it's also leading a great example in doing so, not only story-wise, visual-wise, but it also gives a great example for little girls, which is phenomenal. I've heard all of the, didn't see any in my theater, but I've heard that tons of little girls and women are dressing up as Wonder Woman. There was a whole Wonder Woman weekend for the opening weekend of this movie. And it's great to see that example being set so high, and it's being led in the right direction with a good role model in Gal Gadot and in Diana Prince, Wonder Woman. And it's just really great to see overall that girls have a great superhero to look up to. Boys have had 1,000, Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man, you name it. They have a ton of male superheroes to look up to or to idolize. And females finally have that first real one. Not to say that there haven't been real superheroes, but there are plenty. But that first big screen adaptation that feels like it's really making a difference. And it makes me feel kind of good to know that the females have that strong female character now that can basically compete with the boys. And she very much is. She's done just enough in the theaters, as well as just the overall story, that just makes this movie just really, really great. And I can't say enough good things about it. And for that reason, I'm going to have to give Wonder Woman the grade of an A. So guys, those are pretty much my thoughts regarding Wonder Woman. If you have seen it, please feel free to let me know down in the comment section down below. While you're down there, if you feel so inclined, leave a like, as well as hit that subscribe button so I can see you the next time. But yeah, I definitely love this movie, and I can't wait to own it on Blu-ray, put it right next to my Batman v Superman. I know that movie is not quite as loved, but I still like it a lot. But I'm really looking forward to owning it, and I definitely can't wait to see more of Gal Gadot and the character of Wonder Woman and how she's really developed in Justice League. Like I said, be sure to let me know your comments on the movie, as well as where you think she'll go in Justice League in the comment section down below. But other than that, guys, that's pretty much all I have right now. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next one.